Wall Street Journal reporting on a birthday letter that Donald Trump sent Jeffrey Epstein for his 50th birthday. Ghislaine Maxwell collected that and other letters for a 2003 birthday album. That's according to documents reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. Pages from the album are among the documents examined by Justice Department officials who investigated Epstein and Maxwell years ago, according to people who have reviewed the pages. Here's how the Journal describes the letter Donald Trump wrote to Jeffrey Epstein. Quote, "The letter bearing Trump's name, which was reviewed by the Journal, is bawdy, like others in the album. It contains several lines of typewritten text framed by the outline of a naked woman, which appears to be hand-drawn with a heavy marker. A pair of small arcs denotes the woman's breasts, and the future president's signature is a squiggly Donald below her waist, mimicking pubic hair. The letter concludes, 'Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret.'" In an interview with the Journal, Trump denied writing the letter or drawing that picture. He told the Journal he was preparing to file a lawsuit if it published an article. Back with us, Yvonne Hilliard and Angelo Corazon.
Okay, so this is obviously just breaking. I know you all have had an opportunity to take a gander. What stuck out to me from this story is that the Justice Department officials, obviously the Wall Street Journal, reached out to them, and according to the Journal, they didn't respond to requests for comment or address questions about whether the Trump page and other pages of the birthday album were part of the agency's recent documents review. The FBI also declined to comment. Vaughn, do you have anything from the White House on this yet?
No, not yet. And it should be assumed that not only did this Department of Justice, but also the Biden Department of Justice had these contents here. I think that this is the important context, is that in so many reasons, it has been clear that there are still Epstein files that have been redacted for the sake of victims' names, for instance. There are other files, though, and that has not kept others from arguing that even the mentioning of names, potential clients, right, should be revealed. Information like this, that the Wall Street Journal clearly made the decision that it was worth reporting out at a time that the president has vehemently denied having close friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. Clearly, the Wall Street Journal making the decision with their reporting that this was a valuable information at a time that the president has denied ever engaging in any improper relations. I think it's worth also going back, though, in this context to in October of 2002 in a New York Magazine profile. At the time, then real estate mogul Donald Trump, he said, quote, "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it. Jeffrey enjoys his social life." Clearly, these two men, including in video that NBC News shot more than 25 years ago, you see them dancing as they're appearing to point at women who are in the same room as them. We know that these two men had a relationship, and that clearly that there were conversations that were in nature of women. In this particular instance with the Wall Street Journal, I think it's important to note that the president has denied that he was the one that authored this particular letter or drew this caricature of a female body. At the same time, it lends the question of what other details does the Department of Justice have about the relationship of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. Even if it was not criminal in nature, is there more to this relationship than the public at this present point in time knows? And the president for himself has not explicitly answered the question of whether there is more that the Department of Justice has that he may be aware of that has not been revealed to the public, and whether he would go and take that initiative step to have his attorney general release additional information like this that the Wall Street Journal says that they have seen themselves. Of course, the president suggesting in the phone conversation with the Wall Street Journal that he intended to sue them if they published, in the Wall Street Journal here on this Thursday night deciding to publish despite the threat from the president to sue them.
Angelo, further to Vaughn's point just now about the president's denial, the Justice Department, in fact, Justice Department officials, according to the Wall Street Journal, did not respond to their request for comments or address questions about whether the Trump pages or other pages of the birthday album were part of the agency's recent documents review. That's all the legal stuff that's going to get vetted out over the next 24 plus hours. This story breaking, and to Vaughn's point, it's captured in images that we've seen of this president with partying with Epstein. How does this now play into the ongoing narrative that we started this show talking about tonight? This now drops on the heels of what has been a bruising day for the president with his base.
I mean, part of this, at the center of all of this, these conspiracies, this story, the thing that keeps it churning is that you have a bunch of people that sort of gamify it. They like to find threads and then pull them as much as you can. So when you put anything into there, they pull that thread. So one, I mean, let's assume for a second, the reporting is accurate or not. Let's assume it's accurate. The sentence is kind of creepy. May every day be a wonderful secret? I mean, think of what we're talking about here. People are going to be like, that's weird. I want to hear some answers. Even if it's a joke, you got to give us something. The second thing is his denial is part of the problem. So in his denial, he says, I don't do drawings like that. Well, actually, I can think of 3 off the top of my head that were auctioned. One of him doing a skyline of New York City that sold for 30 grand back in 2017. I can think of another where he did a skyscraper in black Sharpie and then made the sidewalk his name. There was another where he drew a money tree and then somewhere in the roots was Donald. These are things that are easily able to be found. I remember 3. There's got to be more. So it's going to be pretty easy to find Donald Trump's doodles that he was selling at one point or that were getting sold at auction. So this denial that I don't even do these kinds of drawings, there's going to be plenty of proof points to undermine that. And that's part of the issue here to your question, which is that it's just going to give these people something to pull, which is like fresh fuel. And then as it works its way up the chain, it's going to mean more demands for transparency. And then also even the political supporters like Senator Thune, who was out there saying, well, I'm always in favor of more transparency. I trust the president to do the right thing. Now he's going to get asked about it again. And the answer that he's been landed on is no longer going to be sufficient. He's going to have to say something new in light of this. And that's the thing. You never know what's next. And I think that's part of why, they can't just fabricate something and just throw it out there because they don't know what's out there. And there's obviously a lot of material or potential material that they're trying to account for. But this is fresh fuel for the story. That's just how it is.
Angela, to your point about the denial, it is not simply a denial about not having drawn this specific picture or written this specific card. The president saying, I never wrote a picture in my life.